Part 1. The Edge of Death. The storm had no mercy that night. The wind screamed across the mountains, carrying snow like knives that cut through the air. The sky was dark and endless, full of thunder and white mist. On a frozen cliff, far above the world, two great dragons lay chained to the cold stone. Their scales, once shining like burning gold and silver, were now dull and covered with frost. Their wings were broken, their eyes half closed, and their fire was almost gone. For days they had not eaten or spoken. Their names were Azel and Reiner, the last of the Skyfire dragons. They had fought for centuries, but this was how their story seemed to end, bound in chains, forgotten by time, waiting for death to come quietly. Azel opened one eye, but the snow burned against his scales. The chains around his body were heavy, made from black metal that even dragon fire could not melt. He looked at his brother Reiner, who was lying beside him. The younger dragon was breathing weakly, his chest moving slowly under the falling snow. "Brother?" Azel whispered in a deep voice that was almost gone. "It is ending." Reiner did not answer for a long moment. Then he moved his head slightly and said, "We fought till the end, Azel. That is all that matters." His voice cracked in the cold wind. "We fought, but for what?" Azel's voice was filled with pain and regret. "The humans betrayed us. Our fire was not enough to stop them. They feared us. And now look at us." Reiner closed his eyes. "Do not speak of them. They are gone, like us." The storm grew louder, as if it wanted to bury them both under endless snow. The world had forgotten that dragons once ruled the skies, that they had once guarded human kingdoms from monsters of shadow. Humans had called them protectors, friends, gods of the wind. But humans forget easily. When fear came, they turned against those who had saved them. They used strange magic and weapons of cold light to trap the dragons in chains forged by betrayal. That was long ago, but Azel still remembered the fire of battle, the screams of humans, and the pain of falling from the sky when the last spell struck him. Since then, he and Reiner had been trapped on this mountain, far from all life. Now, there was nothing left but wind, snow, and silence. Hours passed, maybe days. In the endless storm, time had lost its meaning. The dragons were too weak to fight, too tired to hope. Then something changed. It was small at first, a sound, almost like a whisper. Azel's ears twitched. He lifted his head slightly. Through the white storm, he saw movement, a shadow, faint but real. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the snow, but no. The shape was walking, moving closer, slowly, step by step. Azel's heart began to beat faster. "Reiner," he whispered. "Wake up." Reiner opened one eye. "What is it?" Azel stared into the storm. "Something is coming." The shape grew clearer, a small figure walking against the wind. It looked weak compared to the storm, yet it did not fall. The dragons watched in silence. The figure was wrapped in fur and carried a glowing staff that gave off a faint, blue light. It moved with effort but also with purpose, as if it knew exactly where it was going. Azel narrowed his eyes. "Impossible," he breathed. "It cannot be." Reiner tried to lift his head but groaned in pain. "What do you see?" Azel's voice trembled. "A human." For a long moment, both dragons were silent. The word itself sounded strange, almost like a curse. No human had set foot in these mountains for centuries. They had forgotten this place, this prison of dragons. Yet here, in the middle of a deadly blizzard, a human walked toward them alone. "Maybe it's a ghost," Reiner whispered. Azel shook his head slowly. "No, it's real." The human stopped a few feet away from them, the glow from his staff lighting the ice around the dragons. His face was hidden under his hood, but his eyes were visible, calm, sharp, and full of something the dragons could not understand. Not fear, not anger, but something else. Pity. The human stood silently, staring at the two chained giants. For a while, no one spoke. The wind howled between them like a warning. Then the human took a slow step forward. The blue light reflected on the black chains that bound the dragons. He reached out a gloved hand and touched the metal. A faint spark of magic danced across his fingers. He pulled his hand back quickly, whispering something under his breath. "So it's true," he murmured. "They are still alive." Azel's deep voice broke the silence. "Human," he said slowly, his tone dangerous. "Why have you come here? Have you come to watch us die?" The human lifted his head slightly, his breath forming white mist in the freezing air. "No," he said softly. "I came because I had to see if the stories were true." Reiner growled weakly. "Stories? You come here for stories? Leave before we burn you." The human did not move. "You cannot burn me," he said quietly. "Not in your condition." Azel's eyes glowed faintly red, anger flickering inside him again after so long. "Then speak, little human. Tell us why you walk in the storm of death." The human looked at them for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his staff and whispered, "Because I am not here to kill you. I am here to save you." The dragons stared at him in disbelief. For the first time in many years, hope and confusion filled their ancient hearts. The snow fell harder around them, the storm howled louder, but none of them moved. The mountain held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. They thought it was death coming for them. But death doesn't walk like that. Part 2. The Human in the Snow. The human stood silent in front of the two mighty dragons, his breath fogging in the freezing wind. The storm roared around him, but he didn't move. He seemed too small, too fragile to survive in such cold. Yet something about him felt strong, not in body, but in purpose. The light from his staff glowed softly, painting blue reflections on the black chains that held the dragons down. Azel watched him closely, his golden eyes filled with both curiosity and anger. He could not understand how a human dared to come so near to dragons that once destroyed armies. But this one didn't shake, didn't bow, didn't even step back. He stood there like someone who had seen death before and was no longer afraid of it. Finally, the human spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "You are Azel and Reiner," he said slowly, as if speaking sacred names. The dragon's eyes narrowed. Reiner's deep voice rumbled through the snow. "You know our names, human? Then you must also know what happened to those who chained us." The man nodded slightly. "I know. I have studied the old records. The truth that my people tried to hide." Azel gave a low growl that made the ground tremble. "Your people destroyed us. They feared what they could not control. Why speak of truth now?" The man took a slow breath, his eyes full of sorrow. "Because lies have ruled for too long," he said. "And because I came to end them." The dragons watched him in silence. The wind howled louder, tossing his cloak, but the man didn't move. His name was Kale, a historian from the southern kingdoms. He had followed broken maps and ancient writings to reach this mountain, the place that didn't exist on any modern chart. Every record called it cursed. No one who came here ever returned. Yet Kale had come, alone, driven by something stronger than fear, guilt. His ancestors had built the chains that bound the dragons. Their greed had turned peace into war. For generations, Kale's bloodline had carried that sin, and now he had chosen to face it. Azel's deep voice echoed again, sharp and heavy. "You think you can end what began 1,000 years ago? You think words can break chains made by magic and hate?" Kale lifted his staff. The blue light flared brighter for a moment, revealing strange runes carved into the metal. "Not words," he said softly, "but understanding." Reiner let out a weak, mocking laugh. "Understanding? You will die before you understand what your kind did to us." The human's face hardened. "Maybe I will," he said, "but I will still try." Kale stepped closer, his boots sinking deep into the snow. Each step seemed heavy, as if the mountain itself resisted his presence. When he reached the nearest chain, he knelt and brushed off the frost. The links were thick, black as night, and marked with glowing red symbols that pulsed slowly, alive, almost breathing. "These aren't just metal," Kale whispered. "They are made from the essence of fear and betrayal. The kings used dragon blood to forge them." His voice trembled slightly as he touched the surface. The metal burned under his glove, but he didn't pull away. I read about this in the forbidden texts. They said the dragons were cursed, not killed, so the world would forget what was done. Azel's eyes softened, only slightly. You speak like one who has seen truth, he said. But truth does not free us. Kale nodded, still staring at the chains. Maybe not yet, but I didn't come empty-handed. From his cloak, he took out a small crystal, glowing faintly white, warm against the cold. The dragons watched closely. The crystal looked ordinary, but its light flickered with strange energy, almost alive. This, Kale said quietly, is part of the heart flame, the last spark of the old dragonfire. It was hidden for centuries. I found it in the ruins of Viren Keep. Reiner's eyes widened in shock. The heart flame? That cannot be. It was lost when the sky fell. Kale looked at him and nodded. It was lost, but someone wanted it found again. I think that's why I'm here. The dragons exchanged a silent glance, their ancient minds trying to make sense of what they saw. Azel lowered his head slightly. And what do you plan to do with it, human? He asked. Kale looked up, snow clinging to his beard. I plan to break one chain, he said, and see if the fire still remembers mercy. Before Azel could answer, the mountain shook with a deep, distant sound. It wasn't thunder, it was something else. Something alive. The snow trembled around them, and Reiner's eyes snapped toward the horizon. Through the white storm, dark shapes were moving, large, crawling forms that slithered across the ice. Kale turned sharply, his face pale. No, they followed me. Azel growled low. What followed you, human? Kale gripped his staff tightly. Shadows, he said. Things that were never meant to live. The air turned colder. The light of the staff flickered weakly as the shapes drew nearer. Dozens of them, tall, thin, black as ash, their eyes burning faint red through the snow. They moved like smoke, like living nightmares. The dragons felt a faint surge of heat in their blood. Instinct, the old fire struggling to return. Reiner's voice was a deep rumble. You brought death to us, human. Kale shook his head, stepping back beside them. No, he said firmly. They were already coming. They feed on what's dying. And you've been dying for a long time. The shadows screamed. A horrible, piercing sound that shook the air. Kale raised his staff, and the blue light flared once more. The storm seemed to pause for a single heartbeat. Azel's eyes narrowed. You came to free us, and now death follows. Explain yourself. Kale turned to him, his voice steady despite the terror closing in. Because freedom always calls to death first, he said. If we survive this, then maybe you will believe me. The dragons stared at the human, small, fragile, but burning with courage. Somewhere deep inside their dying hearts, something stirred, the first spark of respect. As the shadows crept closer, the mountain rumbled again. The blizzard thickened, and in that frozen world of storm and fear, 3 unlikely souls prepared to fight for a chance at redemption. And so, the story of man and dragon truly began, in snow, in darkness, and in the whisper of hope that refused to die. Part 3, The Secret of the Chains. The storm screamed across the frozen mountains, but none of them moved. Kale stood between the chained dragons and the dark shapes in the snow, gripping his glowing staff so tightly his knuckles turned white. The shadows were getting closer, crawling like smoke over the ice. They made no sound but carried a feeling of hunger and cold despair. Azel and Reiner stared at them with silent fury. They recognized those creatures. Memories from the old wars when light still ruled the skies. Shades, Azel whispered. Born from broken souls. They should not exist anymore. Kale nodded without turning his eyes away. They shouldn't, he said quietly. But when your kind fell, the balance fell with you. The world broke, and these things began to rise again. Reiner growled low, his voice shaking the ground. So this is what remains of your world? A place where shadows live and dragons die. Kale didn't answer right away. His eyes were cold and sad. Yes, he finally said. Humans tried to control what they didn't understand. They used your magic to build their cities, and their greed poisoned everything. The shadows are the result of that greed. The same power that chained you created them. The dragons looked at him with disbelief. You speak as if you carry guilt, Azel said slowly. Kale turned his head slightly toward him, his face pale under the storm light. Because I do, he said. My family were the ones who forged your chains. For a moment there was silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any blade. Even the storm seemed to pause. Reiner's eyes burned bright with anger. Your blood did this to us, he hissed. You are a son of the betrayers. Kale didn't deny it. Yes, he said quietly. I am. The last one. Azel's massive claws scraped against the stone as his temper rose. Then why should we not crush you where you stand? Kale lifted his staff, but not as a weapon, as a light in the dark. Because I came to end what they began, he said firmly. I am not here to repeat their sins. I am here to free you. The dragon's eyes narrowed, their breath steaming in the cold. Azel studied the human for a long time. There was no fear in Kale's eyes, only determination and guilt. Something about that look reminded Azel of the humans he had once fought beside, long before the wars, when dragons and men were still allies. Why would you risk your life for us? Azel asked finally. What do you gain by freeing the ones your people hated? Kale's voice trembled slightly, but his words were steady. Because hate doesn't end by chaining it, he said. It ends when someone decides to stop carrying it forward. My people thought they could bury their sins in ice, but I will not. I came here because I couldn't live with their lies anymore. He knelt beside the black metal chain, the blue glow from his staff reflecting off its surface. These chains, Kale said softly, were made with blood magic. When humans turned against you, they couldn't kill dragons. So they made a pact with the shadows. They traded your freedom for their safety. They used pieces of your souls to forge the locks. That's why your fire is weak. Your strength feeds your prison. Azel's eyes widened slightly. Our souls, trapped in the very metal that binds us? Kale nodded. Yes, the chains are alive, feeding on you, keeping you near death but never allowing it to take you. That's why you can't die, even when your bodies fail. Reiner's tail thrashed weakly in anger. So humans stole our fire to protect themselves. They built peace upon our pain. Kale lowered his head. And it didn't last. The kingdoms that betrayed you fell to their own fear. Now, no one remembers your names, only myths twisted by fear. They called you monsters. Azel gave a deep, bitter laugh that echoed across the ice. Monsters, yes. To them, we were the darkness they wanted to forget. But look who walks with darkness now. He nodded toward the shades crawling in the storm. Kale followed his gaze, his jaw tightening. The past always returns, he said. And it's time to face it. He pressed his hand against the lock again. Pain shot through his arm, but he didn't stop. His staff glowed brighter, lighting up strange runes on the chain. They pulsed like veins full of fire. These symbols, Kale whispered, can be broken, but only if you trust me. Azel's deep voice rumbled low. Trust a human? After what your kind has done. Kale met his gaze without fear. Not all humans are the same, he said quietly. Some of us still remember the old bond. Reiner let out a low growl. If you fail, human, these shades will devour us all. Kale nodded. Then I will fail trying to make things right. Slowly, he took the white crystal, the piece of the heart flame, and placed it against the lock. A faint hum filled the air. The snow lifted around them in slow motion, caught in the invisible energy that began to form. The dragons felt it too. A strange warmth, something they hadn't felt in centuries. It was the essence of their own fire, returning in small sparks. It responds to you, Azel said in surprise. You carry the fire, human. Kale didn't look up. His voice was calm but heavy. No, he whispered. The fire carries me. Then a loud crack broke through the storm. One of the symbols on the chain shattered, glowing red before fading into black dust. The mountain trembled, and the shades screamed in anger. They felt the breaking of magic, their food, their power, starting to crumble. The shadows rushed forward, faster than before, their red eyes burning. Kale stumbled back, clutching his staff as the light flickered. "It worked!" he shouted. "One seal is broken." Reiner's chest heaved, and a faint flame slipped between his teeth, weak but real. "Then we fight," he growled. Azel's voice boomed like thunder. "For the first time in centuries," he said, "we fight not to die but to live." Kale turned toward the oncoming wave of darkness, his cloak whipping in the wind. He raised his staff high, the blue light bursting into white flame. "Then stand with me, dragons of Skyfire," he shouted. "Let the world remember what it lost." The shadows screamed louder, and the snow turned red from the light. The human and the dragons stood side by side, ancient enemies bound by one purpose. For the first time in 1,000 years, the mountain burned with the promise of hope. And deep inside the ice, the old magic began to wake again. Part 4, The Bond of Fire and Flesh. The mountain shook as the shadows screamed and rushed through the storm. Their bodies twisted like smoke and ice, crawling over the ground faster than any living creature. The air turned heavy, thick with darkness. Kale stood at the front, his staff glowing bright blue, the light pushing back the black fog that surrounded them. Behind him, the two dragons struggled to rise. The broken chains rattled, still holding them down, but for the first time in centuries, the fire inside them was moving again. Azel's golden eyes burned faintly. Reiner's chest glowed with weak embers, small but alive. The warmth of their old power was returning, and with it came something else, hope. Kale's heart pounded in his chest. Every part of him screamed to run, but he stayed. He planted his staff into the ice, whispering old words that only few humans remembered. Light spread from the staff like ripples in water, forming a small circle of safety around them. The first of the shadows hit that barrier and hissed in pain, their bodies burning where the light touched. Azel watched the human and growled softly. "You use old magic," he said. "The language of dragons." Kale nodded quickly, sweat freezing on his face. "It was never human magic to begin with," he said. "It was yours. We only borrowed it." The shadows gathered, their red eyes glowing through the snow. Hundreds of them surrounded the small circle of light, clawing and screaming. Reiner tried to lift his head higher, but the chains still held his wings down. "These creatures are too many," he said. "We cannot fight like this." Kale looked over his shoulder, his voice strained. "Then let me break the second seal. If I can free one of you completely, we can fight together." Azel's voice thundered through the storm. "Do it." Kale knelt beside the second lock. His hands were shaking, both from cold and fear. He pressed the white crystal, the heart flame, against the chain and began to whisper again. The glow grew brighter, the runes on the metal starting to crack. But the shadows sensed what he was doing. They screamed louder and threw themselves against the barrier. The circle of light began to flicker. The creatures moved faster, piling on top of each other like a wave of darkness. Kale shouted, "Hold them off! I just need a little more time." Reiner roared, forcing his dying body to move. He pulled against the chains until the metal groaned. The effort sent pain through every part of him, but he didn't stop. "You heard him, brother," Reiner growled. "Let us give the human his time." Azel's wings trembled, but he lifted his head high, his eyes blazing bright for the first time in ages. "Then let us remind the world what dragons truly are." Azel drew in a deep breath, the air around him heating instantly. The snow melted in a wide circle, steam rising into the freezing wind. Then, with a thunderous roar that echoed across the mountains, he unleashed his fire. The flames burst from his jaws, golden and wild, cutting through the darkness like a second sunrise. The shades screamed, burning in midair before turning to black ash. The light of dragonfire filled the sky, and for a moment, even the storm itself seemed to fear it. Kale felt the wave of heat behind him but didn't flinch. The second seal glowed red, cracking faster now. The heart flame pulsed in his hands, its light almost blinding. Reiner coughed weakly, but his voice carried pride. "Your fire still burns, brother." Azel turned his head slightly, a faint smile in his glowing eyes. It never left. It only slept. Then came a sharp sound. Crack! And the second lock shattered into pieces. The broken metal fell to the ground, steaming. A surge of pure energy rushed through the air, strong enough to shake the clouds. Reiner's body glowed red and gold. The chains around his wings burst apart like paper. For the first time in centuries, he was free. He spread his wings wide, the snow exploding into the air around him, and let out a roar that made the mountain tremble. His flame returned, bright blue and burning with life. Kale fell back onto the ice, breathing hard, his vision blurred. The barrier around them vanished, and the shadows rushed forward again. But this time, they were met by a wall of living fire. Reiner swept his wings forward, sending waves of flame across the battlefield. The storm turned red and gold, the blizzard melting in moments. The shades shrieked and fell apart one by one, their dark forms breaking like glass in the light. Azel's chains still held him, but now the fire in his chest burned strong enough to melt the ice beneath him. He looked at Kale, who was lying weakly on the ground, his hands still clutching the heart flame. "Human," Azel said, his deep voice echoing across the cliff. "You fought beside us when you could have run." Kale opened his eyes slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't come here to watch heroes die." The last of the shades fell silent. Smoke and snow drifted together, painting the world in strange gray light. Reiner landed beside Kale, his massive claws gently scraping the ice. He looked down at the small human who had done what no one else dared to do. "Your body is fragile," Reiner said softly. "But your heart, it burns brighter than fire." Kale gave a tired smile. "Then maybe we're not so different after all." For the first time in hundreds of years, the dragons laughed. It was a deep, echoing sound that rolled through the mountains like thunder. The storm began to calm. The air warmed. The chains that remained glowed faintly red, their strength fading. Azel felt it, the bond that now connected them. It wasn't born from fear or power. It was something stronger, trust. The human's courage had reached the ancient hearts of the dragons. Kale stood slowly, leaning on his staff, his breath visible in the cold. "This fight isn't over," he said, looking toward the dark horizon. "Those shadows were only the beginning. The true curse lies within the mountain itself." Azel's eyes glowed fiercely. "Then we end it together." Reiner spread his wings again, sending waves of snow into the sky. "Together," he agreed. And in that frozen world, for the first time in centuries, the bond between dragon and human was reborn. Not in blood, but in fire and courage. The storm had tested them, but it had also created something new. A bond of fire and flesh that would burn against the darkness to come. Part 5: The Breaking of Chains. The storm had calmed, but the air still carried the weight of old magic. Smoke rose from the melted snow, turning the air thick and gray. The mountain groaned under the weight of what had just happened. Azel and Reiner stood tall now, fire flickering faintly inside their chests. Reiner's chains lay broken across the ice, glowing red before fading to dust. Azel still remained bound, the last and strongest set of chains cutting deep into his scales. Their black metal pulsed faintly, feeding on his strength, holding him prisoner. Kale stood before him, his body weak and trembling, the white crystal of the heart flame glowing faintly in his hand. He was covered in frost, his cloak torn, and blood marked his cheek where the storm had cut him. Still, his eyes burned with determination. Azel looked down at the human, his massive head lowering until his golden eyes met Kale's. "You have freed my brother," he said in a deep rumble that echoed across the mountains. "You fought with us when you could have run. But this last chain, it is not like the others. It carries the core of the curse itself. It will fight back." Kale nodded slowly. "Then let it fight," he said quietly. "I didn't come this far to stop now." Reiner stepped closer, his massive wings folding behind him. "You have already risked your life, human. This one will kill you." Kale looked up at the dragon, his breath shallow. If I walk away now, your pain continues. And if freeing you costs me my life, then maybe that is what my blood owes yours. His words were simple, but they hit deep. The dragons had fought humans for centuries, but never had they heard one speak with such courage. Azel closed his eyes slowly. Then let the debt end tonight, he said softly. Kale approached the final chain. It was darker than the others, alive with strange movement, almost like veins under skin. The runes on its surface pulsed in rhythm with Azel's heartbeat. Kale pressed his palm to the cold metal and instantly felt it bite back. Pain shot up his arm like fire. He gasped, falling to his knees, but didn't pull away. The chain whispered to him, voices from the past, screams, cries, and laughter twisted by time. The curse spoke in the language of the dead, tried to break his will. You cannot undo what was done, the voices hissed. The dragons will rise again, and humans will fall. Kale clenched his teeth, pressing harder against the chain. Then let them rise, he shouted through the pain. Let the world remember the truth. The heart flame in his hand flared bright, white light spilling across the mountain. The runes on the chain screamed and twisted. Azel felt the fire in his blood react to it. He roared, his wings straining against the chains, his claws digging deep into the ice. Now, Kale, he thundered. End it. The wind howled as if the world itself resisted them. Kale raised the heart flame high, his eyes glowing faintly from the power flowing through him. The energy tore through his body like lightning. He could feel his heart slowing, his strength fading. Reiner called out, You'll die, human. Stop. Kale turned his head slightly, smiling weakly. Then I'll die doing what's right. With the last of his strength, Kale slammed the heart flame into the center of the lock. The mountain shook violently. A flash of white light exploded, blinding everything in sight. The sound was like thunder and breaking glass combined. The chain screamed. Yes, screamed. Like something alive being destroyed. The magic tore itself apart. Azel's body glowed red and gold, his fire bursting free from every wound, every crack, every scar. The black metal shattered into 1,000 burning fragments that flew across the air and vanished like sparks. The light faded slowly, revealing Kale lying motionless on the ice. The dragons stood free. For the first time in 1,000 years, their wings were unbound, their fire alive again. Azel took a slow breath, and the world seemed to come alive with it. Snow melted, the storm broke apart, and the mountain glowed faintly under the sunlight peeking through the clouds. Freedom had a sound. It was the deep, steady heartbeat of dragons that had been silenced for too long. Reiner lowered his head beside Kale's still body. He's not breathing, he said softly. Azel looked down, his heart heavy. No, he whispered. He gave everything. The dragons bowed their heads in silence, the wind moving gently between them. Azel closed his eyes. He was small in body, he said, but greater in spirit than all the kings who ever lived. Then, faintly, a small light began to glow in Kale's chest. The heart flame, cracked and fading, still pulsed weakly beside him. Its energy spread into his body, wrapping him in soft white fire. Azel stepped closer, his eyes wide. The fire chooses him, he whispered. Reiner tilted his head. It cannot be. Can it? The heart flame's glow sank slowly into Kale's heart, and a moment later, he gasped and opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the two dragons watching him, their giant shadows cast across the snow. Kale blinked weakly, his voice barely audible. Did it work? Azel smiled, a rare, ancient smile full of warmth. Yes, he said softly. We are free. Kale let out a shaky laugh, his body trembling. Then I guess I can rest now. Reiner shook his massive head. Not yet, little human. You have started something far greater than rest. Azel reached down carefully, his huge claw lowering beside Kale. Come, he said gently. The world will not believe what has happened here, but they will learn. Kale reached out, touching the dragon's claw with his small, frost-bitten hand. For the first time, dragon and human stood together, equals bound not by fear or chains, but by trust and sacrifice. The mountain shone with new light, the snow turning to mist. The storm was gone. Above them, the sky broke open with golden sunlight. Azel spread his wings wide, feeling the air flow through them again. Felt like life itself. Reiner roared, the sound echoing for miles, shaking the clouds away. Kale looked up at the dragons, his eyes full of quiet wonder. He whispered, "It's beautiful," and Azel answered, his voice deep and proud. "Freedom always is." The dragons rose into the air, lifting Kale with them, their wings cutting through the wind. Below, the chains that had once held them melted into the earth. The curse was broken, and with it, a new bond was born. One forged not by power, but by courage and heart. Part 6, Fire Against the Storm. The sun had broken through the clouds for the first time in ages, its light painting the icy peaks gold. Azel and Reiner soared high above the mountains, their wings stretching wide, their fire flowing freely once more. Below them, Kale rode upon Azel's back, his cloak fluttering in the cold wind, his eyes wide with awe. He could feel the air vibrate under the strength of their flight. It was not just a journey through the sky, it was the feeling of freedom itself. But deep within the mountain, something ancient stirred. The curse that had held the dragons for centuries was broken. Yet the magic that bound it was not gone. It twisted in the heart of the mountain, turning the rock black, and from that darkness came a rumble that shook the heavens. The wind changed again. The storm returned, darker and angrier than before. The sky bled red. Azel felt it first. "The mountain still breathes," he growled, turning his golden eyes toward the horizon. Reiner circled close beside him, the glow of his blue fire lighting the clouds. "Then it means the true heart of the curse still lives," he said. Kale gripped the dragon's scales tightly. "Where is it coming from?" he shouted against the roaring wind. Azel's voice was grave. "From the heart of the storm itself, the place where our chains were forged." Lightning cracked across the sky, splitting it open like glass. Out of the storm came a shape, massive, black, and shifting, made of shadow and fire. It had no true form, but its presence was heavy and cold. Its voice was like thunder made of hate. "You think you are free, old beasts?" it roared. "Your fire was never yours. It belonged to me." Kale's blood turned to ice. The creature wasn't alive. It was the curse, given shape and rage. Reiner growled, his eyes glowing bright. "Then you will learn what it means to face fire unbound." The shadow creature screamed, sending waves of darkness that cracked the air. Azel and Reiner spread their wings, fire blazing from their throats. The sky exploded with light and shadow. The battle began. Azel dived first, cutting through the storm like a golden arrow. His fire struck the creature's chest, lighting up the clouds. Reiner followed, roaring as he unleashed a stream of blue flame that burned through the black mist. But the curse was strong, too strong. It absorbed their fire, its form growing larger. "Your fire feeds me," it howled. The storm roared louder, lightning wrapping around its body. Kale held tightly to Azel's scales, his eyes fixed on the creature. He could feel the heart flame pulsing weakly in his chest. It was the last piece of power he had, the same fire that had freed the dragons. He realized what it meant. "Azel," he called out through the wind. "It's feeding on your flames, but it cannot take mine. I carry the heart flame." Azel twisted his head slightly, his deep voice thunderous even in the storm. "Kale, if you release it, you'll die." Kale's voice was firm, his heart steady. "Maybe, but if we don't, everyone dies." Reiner shouted through the roaring storm. "There must be another way." Kale shook his head. "There isn't. This was always my purpose." He climbed higher up Azel's neck, standing between the dragon's horns, the wind tearing at his cloak. The light in his chest grew brighter, white and pure. He raised his hand toward the sky. The creature laughed, its voice echoing. "You are nothing but flesh. Your fire is a spark in the storm." Kale closed his eyes, whispering softly, Then let this spark become a sun. The heart flame exploded in his chest. A beam of pure white fire burst from Kale's body, shooting into the sky, cutting through the black clouds like dawn breaking through night. Azel and Reiner roared together, pouring their fire into his. Gold and blue mixed with white, forming a blinding storm of light. The shadow creature screamed, its body tearing apart as the light burned through it. The darkness tried to fight back, but the combined power of dragonfire and human spirit was too strong. The storm collapsed inward, vanishing in a single burst of light that filled the entire horizon. Then there was silence. The sky cleared slowly, the clouds fading into soft white mist. Sunlight poured over the mountains, warm and golden. Snow melted, revealing green beneath for the first time in centuries. Azel hovered in the sky, wings beating softly. He looked down, his heart heavy. Kale's body was limp, his cloak fluttering gently. Reiner flew closer, his voice low. He gave everything. Azel's eyes burned bright, reflecting the sunlight. No, he said softly. He became everything. They landed on the mountaintop where the battle had begun. Azel placed Kale's body gently upon the ground. For a long moment, the dragons stood silent, the wind whispering through the peaks. Then, as the last breath of light touched the horizon, Kale's hand moved. His eyes opened slowly. A faint glow still burned inside his chest. Not as bright as before, but alive. Reiner lowered his massive head beside him. You still live, he said softly. Kale smiled weakly. Guess I wasn't done yet. Azel laughed, a deep, proud sound that echoed across the valley. You carry dragonfire now, he said. It will never let you die so easily. The three of them looked out across the endless white world. The storm was gone. The mountain no longer rumbled. Peace had returned. Kale stood slowly, looking up at the dragons. What now? He asked quietly. Azel's voice was calm, powerful. Now we rebuild the bond between our kinds. You have shown that courage is not born from size or fire, but from heart. Reiner smiled, his scales glowing faintly in the sunlight. And if the world forgets this again, we will remind them. Kale nodded, the wind lifting his hair. He looked at the horizon where the sun met the snow and whispered, Then let's make the world remember. The dragons spread their wings wide, the wind roaring around them. Kale climbed onto Azel's back once more. Together, the three of them rose into the golden sky, their shadows crossing the mountains like a promise. That light, once awakened, can never be chained again. Part 7. A New Dawn. Morning came slowly, soft and golden over the endless white mountains. The storm was gone. The sky was clear and blue, so bright it looked like the world had been born again. Azel and Reiner stood on a high peak, their massive wings folded behind them, their scales shining in the sunlight like molten gold and sapphire. Between them stood Kale, small in size but tall in spirit. The wind brushed his hair as he looked across the land below. Valleys once frozen were now waking with life. Streams of clear water flowed where ice had ruled for centuries. The curse was gone. Azel turned his head, his deep voice rumbling through the quiet air. The world breathes again, he said, for the first time in 1,000 years. Reiner nodded slowly, his blue eyes thoughtful. And it breathes because of him. He looked down at Kale, who smiled softly. Not just because of me, Kale said. Because we stood together. The dragons looked at each other, then back at him. Azel's golden eyes glowed with pride. Few humans would have dared what you did, he said. You faced fear with no weapon but your heart. You carried the fire of dragons inside you, and you did not let it burn you. Instead, you made it light. Kale looked down at his chest, where the faint glow of the heart flame still pulsed. It didn't hurt anymore, felt alive, warm. Maybe it was never just dragon fire, he said quietly. Maybe it was the fire that lives in everyone, waiting for the right reason to burn. Azel and Reiner smiled, the sound of their laughter rolling softly through the sky like distant thunder. Kale turned to face the horizon. Far beyond the mountains lay green forests, rivers, and the world of men. He hadn't seen it in many weeks, but now it called to him again. "It's time to go home," he said. Reiner lowered his head, his voice gentle. "Will they believe what you tell them?" Kale smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but they'll feel it in the wind, in the warmth, in the sunrise. The world will know something changed." Azel stepped closer, lowering his huge claw beside him. "Then let us take you there," he said. Kale climbed onto the dragon's back once more, gripping the edge of his scales as the sunlight washed over them. Reiner spread his wings wide, the air glowing around him. With one great leap, both dragons took flight, their powerful wings cutting through the sky. They flew over mountains and valleys, over rivers that glittered like silver threads. Villages below looked up in awe as two giant dragons soared above them, carrying a human who glowed faintly like living light. The people gasped, some fell to their knees, others pointed to the sky, whispering legends that would be told for centuries. "The dragons have returned," they said, "and they fly with a man." Kale looked down at them, smiling. He didn't feel fear anymore, only peace. The dragon's shadows followed across the land like the wings of destiny. As they passed over the world, snow melted, trees bloomed, and warmth spread wherever they went. Finally, they landed on a high hill overlooking a green valley, Kale's homeland. The air smelled of earth and spring. Azel lowered his head, his golden eyes calm. "This is where your journey began," he said, "and where ours begins anew." Kale nodded. "I'll tell them your story," he said quietly, "so they'll remember that even in the coldest storms, light can rise again." Reiner smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting. "And we will fly above, watching. The bond between dragon and man will not fade this time." Azel lowered his massive head until his eyes were level with Kale's. "Remember, little flame," he said softly. "You carry the fire within you now. Never let it die." Kale placed his hand gently on the dragon's warm scales. "I won't," he whispered. "I promise." The dragons spread their wings once more, their roars echoing across the valley like the song of creation itself. Then, with a mighty leap, they rose into the clouds, circling once above Kale before vanishing into the golden sky. Kale stood there, watching until they disappeared into the light. The wind brushed his face and he smiled. A new dawn had come, not just for dragons, not just for humans, but for all who still dared to hope. Kale turned toward the sunrise and began walking down the hill. Each step left small trails of warmth in the grass, as if the fire inside him still shared its light with the world. And high above, two shadows crossed the sun, a reminder that courage, once awakened, never fades. And so, the curse was broken. The dragons were free, and a single human proved that courage can shine brighter than any fire. If you felt Kale's journey in your heart, remember this: no chain, no storm, and no fear can hold down a soul that burns for what's right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY. Your support helps keep these legends alive. Until next time, keep your fire alive and keep believing in the impossible. Fire.